Oh man, I'm so excited to have you here today. We're about to turn the trade show world upside down. Welcome to Trade Show University, everybody. So glad to have you back here on campus. And I have a just a phenomenal guest today who I've known for a couple of years and become a friend. He has started some amazing things. He was the founder of Total Life Freedom, where he helped people get to that part of freedom in their life, or that time freedom, money freedom. And today is also doing membership freedom, where he's helping businesses develop memberships in all sorts of different niches. He's also an author, just one of the best human beings you'll ever meet in your life. Vincent Pugliese, welcome to Trade Show University. Say hi to everybody.
My pleasure. You nailed my name straight, which most people don't. So we're off to a great start already. Honored to be here. Thanks so much for what an amazing introduction, and I'm excited for this.
Yes, absolutely. I'm super excited because for everybody, Vincent has developed something called the UNConference. And this is something when he first started talking about it, I was like, oh, wait, what is this? What is this? I mean, I've been involved in events, conferences, trade shows, expos for 30 plus years. And this is something different because of the focus. So, Vincent, tell everybody describe the unconference and tell them the inspiration behind it.
Yeah, thank you. So it really, I think like anything else, it comes from dissatisfaction. I think anytime you're going to create something, at least for me, it comes from what's missing in a market that I enjoy being a part of. So what happens, I would go to a lot of entrepreneurial conferences and a lot of the world that you're in, and I would go to these events and different types of events, and I would make the greatest connections at these events. I would meet people that elevated my business, elevated my network. I could do the same for others. We would have amazing conversations, long-lasting relationships, collaborations, all these amazing things that, like, wow, yeah, I spent a good amount of money, but it was so worth it. And then I would go back, and in the very beginning, I would do like everybody else, and I would go to the different seminars, and I would go to different, all the different speakers, and they all have value. But what started happening after about the first or second one is I stopped going to all the different speakers because everybody that I wanted to talk to was kind of hanging around the hallways. They were having coffee talk and little brainstorming sessions. There was no agenda to it. They just knew more than I did that, yeah, they're bringing all these people together, but really we get to now collaborate within this environment of them bringing great people together. Right. So I remember walking down the hallway and there's John Lee Dumas, who had an amazing, podcast, Entrepreneurs on Fire. And there's him and six other people, and they're just kind of sitting around, like talking, helping each other in the hotel lobby. And they're not in any of the sessions, and they flew out here and they paid the money. And so I always think about this. I'm like, these great connections I had happened in the hallways. And then at the same time, within our business, we would do these small mastermind retreats, which would get the same kind of vibe. It would be like 10 to 12 to 14 people together for a handful of days, masterminding, brainstorming, helping, connecting. And then what happened was about 5 years ago, me and another person came up with this. We were talking about this idea of, we're kind of tired of this. We're kind of tired of this same format. There's speakers and there's breakouts, and the breakouts are basically just mini speaker sessions, and it's a one-to-many thing where most of the people are sitting back passively, taking notes in a notebook that they're probably never going to open up once they leave, because they're listening to all these speakers and they're flooded with information, but yet they will meet two or three people that will change their life. And they will forget about the information for the most part. And as a speaker, you're going to forget about my information. And honestly, you can go listen to my video on my podcast or my YouTube. Like, I'm giving this content away. I would much rather connect with them one-to-one in this environment than have everybody listen to a speech. So we kind of came up with this idea, like, what if we did it completely different? What if we did a Seinfeld and did the opposite, and we just flipped it around? And the idea was no speakers, no stages, no pitching. No, there's not this big sell at the end. What we're going to do is we're going to take that hallway of the conference, and we're going to blend it with the intimate mastermind retreat. We're going to create an event where there isn't all these things that are going to take you away. What we're going to do is bring these people together, like I found value from, but we're going to allow them to actually connect deeply. We're going to have small mastermind groups within it. We're going to have coaches. We're going to have group sessions. Everything's going to be interactive where you're meeting the people that would be speaking on stage instead of just passively listening. And then you're going to come out with not only great ideas that's actually built off of the questions you have, but also connections that are going to live on for years or decades. So that's where the idea came from.
That's just outstanding. It took me right back to sitting in some of those sessions, the workshops, the keynote speeches, and so many times yeah, you get value out of it, but the greatest value is typically the people that I am surrounded with that I just turn before the thing starts, and we connect,
Yep.
we introduce each other, we find out we have some amazing connection that we never would have guessed, and all of a sudden that becomes a relationship. It becomes sometimes a friendship that lasts for a long time, could become a business relationship, but it's those personal one-on-one things. And then sometimes you want to go up and you have a question for the speaker, but they're not doing a Q&A, and so
Nope.
maybe you're standing in a long line and it's like, oh
For a
shoot,
quick,
I got to get
yeah,
back, and oh yeah, or you might get a half a second with the speaker if you're willing to stand in line. So I love everything about what you're saying, because there's definitely nuggets of absolute gold that are hidden in at every trade show, but it's
yeah.
unscripted. It's
It's
unscripted.
unscripted, and you don't know who's in the crowd. So here's where the idea was, the seed was planted. I went to an event called Business Gets Personal about 10 years ago in New York City, and Dave Ramsey put on the event, but it was Dave Ramsey and Seth Godin and Gary Vaynerchuk.
Oh,
Big, big hitting
yeah,
lineup, even
yeah.
10 years ago. They're giving the three keynotes, and there's little breakouts in between, but that's really the event. And that's why we all went. Well, in the hallway beforehand, there was a conversation going on, and I'm bold enough to just interrupt. Not everybody's like this, right? So you don't have to be like this. But I heard this conversation, and I just interjected myself into the conversation. I said, "Hey, I like what you're talking about," and a group of 5 turned into a group of 6 very quickly because I joined. And next to me was this guy named Ken, and we just hit it off right away. His name's Ken Carfagno, who's a member of our community now,
Yeah.
and he's one of my closest friends. And we didn't know each other. And because of that conversation, we kept chatting. This entire event in New York, we would meet up after the speakers and we would talk and we brainstorm ideas. And what are you working on? Well, from that moment on, every week we had a phone call and we masterminded together. And for 2 years, we did that every week. And that's literally what led to me creating my very first mastermind and my very first membership, was the structure that we built to do that. But the funniest thing about that, and Ken's going to be at the first unconference and we've been together ever since in terms of business partnerships and connecting. But Seth Godin said something on that stage that really hit. We're sitting up there and they're the idols, right? They're the heroes. And he said, I know you're all here for these keynotes. He goes, but you're going to learn more from the people sitting to your left and to your right today than you will from anything we say on stage. And I was
Ah,
like, whoa. And it made me realize, oh, instead of writing down all this info, I should be writing down the names of the people that I'm talking to. And I started doing that. And that, I'm not joking, that was like a cornerstone of the connection and the wealth of connection. The book that I would write 8 years later was, wow, instead of focusing on the information so much, focus on the people. And then I saw that event, I started talking to the people to my left that I normally wouldn't have done. And this woman worked for Gary Vee, and she was doing this thing with Tim Ferriss. And I'm like, what? So we're sitting in the hallway talking. I'm like, it just started hitting me. Everybody knows something that I don't. And I know something that they don't. But guess what? I went to a conference last week. It was a one-day thing, and I got to meet Donald Miller, which was really cool. But I left there and I tried to connect. I left there with 10 names. But then when I saw the Facebook group of the 200 people that were there that I never met, I was like, that's a lot of missed opportunity. It's a lot
mhm,
because there's so many people there that I will not meet because
mhm.
it wasn't structured for me to meet them. It
Right.
was structured for me to listen to the 3 keynote speakers. But the value in my life will be from those 200 people. So that's exact. So I want everybody coming to the unconference, being that we're limiting to 100 people and it's application based, to have a higher level of quality and commitment, but also you to leave there knowing these people, you to leave there collaborating with these people, inspired from them, building out from them. Some of the greatest connections I've ever made have been made at these events because people are willing to take the time and the money to leave, which is not easy to do, leave your family, spend some money, spend a couple of days away from work. But every single time I leave and I go, this was worth 10 times what I paid because of the connections I made.
You're definitely hitting a lot of hot buttons here that are just so important. And I think in the trade show world, we're seeing a lot more networking events, a lot more things that are semi-structured, not really structured. It's they're built for, let's put it this way, built for people like you who are bold. They're not built for
Yeah.
people like me. I'm a natural introvert, and
Mm-hmm.
so I see a group of 5 people, and I'm like, okay, let me go find someone who's standing by themselves,
Okay.
and maybe
Yeah. Or not find anybody at all. Just
right,
go scroll on my phone. Like a lot of
right, right.
I saw 4 tables at this place, and when I was walking through the one I went to, and all 4 had one person at each table scrolling their phone.
Mm,
And that's just modern culture. But I'm like,
yeah,
can you imagine if the 4 of you got off your stinking phone and sat at one table together and started talking? Now, I understand what you're saying about the introvert thing, but we are almost programmed now with our cell phones to become
hmm,
more introverted.
right.
And it's not to push you out of your comfort zone, but to start thinking, this is, I know it's uncomfortable at times, but this is really where the value is going to be. And introverts is, and I'm one of them. I'm an extroverted introvert. And what I've learned in this process is introverts love, and tell me if I'm wrong, if you're this, they love one-to-one conversation, but they just don't like big group, just meetups. I don't
Yeah,
like small talk.
yeah, yeah,
But
yes,
if
I'm with you. Yep.
But if we could put a nice number of people in small groups and small one-to-one or one to a few conversations around meaningful topics that are helpful to you, it's it's almost a paradise for that because you're not in big crowds and you're
Right.
not expected to do something that's so uncomfortable in terms of your personality. Like if you meet somebody and you have a 3 hour conversation and it's amazing, that's what you're here for. You don't have to follow an agenda. So my job is to bring the people into the room for that.
Yeah, for everyone watching or listening to this, we've all been at those big events where you're what Vincent is saying is resonating. You've been there, you're like, oh yeah, I remember I made this connection, or I met with a vendor or a customer I had never met in person before, and we've had a great relationship, and it took everything to the next level
Yep.
because we were finally able to meet one-on-one, and and we had dinner later that day, and we really were able to connect more than just via email or phone call. And so if you are in the business of putting on these kinds of events, whether that is for an association or you're putting on a big trade show, or maybe you're doing it for your own company and you're putting on something right now, it is focused on you're putting the emphasis and the onus on the attendee that they've got to make the connection.
Mhm.
And what Vincent is saying, he's flipping the script and he's saying, no, as the person who is coordinating and planning this whole thing, I am going to help facilitate all of these connections. We are going to give you every opportunity. Basically, if you don't connect in a very meaningful way from this unconference, that's on you. That's not on us. That's on you. Is
Well,
that what
yeah. Well, you think exactly. You think about the way it's structured, right? I talk to a lot of these event coordinators. It's structured on, hey, how's the expo room gonna go? When are the speakers on stage? Who's running the breakouts? All these things where it's from a platform, right?
Mhm.
It's talking not down to the audience, but a little bit, right? They're a little bit higher than you, and these are the people teaching you. What we're looking at is every attendee is just as important as the next, right? So you come into this room, there's no heroes here. Some people are more elevated here, but then you might be more elevated with the way that you handle your family or the way you handle your time or just your mindset. Everybody can help. So if we can bring these people together and we can allow them to form this and we can cultivate it. So here's what we do differently. Being that we're not doing a big giant event, we are finding out, what is it that each attendee is looking for? What is it that each attendee can add value to? So I can see Jim's coming, and I look at the list and I go, oh, here's 5 people that would be really great for him to be connected to. Well, guess what I get to do as a connector? I get to introduce them. That never happens for me at an event.
Yeah.
Rarely. I'll give you the example, but okay, I can't say never, but it wasn't from the event. I'll give you an example. I went to Social Media Marketing World about, I'm sorry, it was Podcast Movement 2017. And there was a guy, Carrie Green, who's a
Okay.
podcast editor,
Yeah, I
right?
know Carrie. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Carrie, he heard me on a different podcast. He liked it. We met in person at Podcast Movement. Well, I'm sitting there and I'm about to go into an event, and he comes over and he taps me on the shoulder. He goes, "Come here." He goes, "Come out here for a second." And I go, "All right, yeah." So he goes, "I want somebody I want you to meet." So he goes, "Vincent, this is Nick Loper. Nick Loper runs Side Hustle Nation, which I had heard of. It was a big podcast." And he goes, "I think you guys should connect. I think your story would be great for a show." Now, it's not easy to get on Nick's show. He's very particular in terms of the story and the hook. So we sat outside, we talked for 5 minutes. He goes, "Hey, let's talk later." So, okay. So we met up for nachos at like 11 o'clock at night with 7 other friends. And he's like interviewing me a little bit. And I'm like, he goes, "I think this could work." So we talked on the phone one more time and we wrapped it up. And then I got on his show. And that was one of the 2 biggest podcast episodes for my book, Freelance to Freedom, that moved the needle on it. Right. I'm going to be on the show again in 2 weeks. He invited me back. Now,
Nice.
my point is Carrie Green did exactly what so many people don't do running these events, and which is what I want to do. Finding out there's Vincent over here, there's Carrie over here, there's Vincent over here, and there's Nick over here. Nick is looking for great guests for his podcast. Vincent has a story that needs to be told. If I don't bring them together, one's going to be in one workshop, one's going to be in the other. They're going to gain more knowledge, but they're not going to gain connection. So he brought them together. So now, not trying to do a huge event, I get to look at this almost like a mad scientist. Like, who am I bringing together? How can I make their lives better? I love that. That might not be for everybody, but that's something that's for my wife and I are super excited to do. So as every new person joins, I get to now build this database of people that I can connect together, because I think it's going to be the most valuable thing they're going to leave with when they meet and connect. So that's one thing where if he didn't do that for me, that event would have been completely different. But I didn't know enough or was connected enough to even make that connection to Nick without Carrie.
So good. So good. And that's a challenge for every single person listening. I don't care if you're running an event, or you're just doing it on your own. Who
Mm-hmm.
do you know that you can connect when you're meeting with somebody? What do they need? Are you learning? Are you taking enough time to learn about them?
Yeah,
And that's really what the UNConference is all about, learning about each person and then saying, okay, who else needs this skill set? Who else has questions around this topic that this person can answer? And like you said, they don't have to be the keynote. They don't have to be the top-notch person, but they meet a very, very specific need, and making that connection makes it happen. If you don't make that connection may never, ever happen, may ever,
totally.
never be made. Yeah.
And thinking from my perspective, it's really exciting. Like, okay, say we can do this, and say people that come to the event start realizing, oh, I can do this too. Now we multiply this, right? People go, oh, I see, like, oh, maybe it's not all about Facebook ads and funnels. Maybe it really is simpler than that in terms of building this out, because one great connection will change your life. I really believe that. And I think that's going to be kind of the theme of this. You're one connection away. Example, I was in a mastermind. So I was in, we talk about the hallways in the mastermind. I was in a mastermind about 7 or 8 years ago, and I was talking about what I did. At that point, I was a sports photographer. This is right before I got into this world. And I was talking about that. There was another guy Kyle Schultz, who had a membership for parents to take better pictures of their kids.
Hmm.
That's interesting. It's $9 a month. He's got over 1,000 members. Not a bad business model. He's making 10 grand a month to do a weekly, video on photography. And he sells courses on top of it. He was in Donald Miller's book, Story Brand, because they had such a big success from it. So I turned around, I looked at him, and I was like, I have an idea. And he said, yes. And I was like, you don't even know what I'm going to say. And he said, go ahead, tell me. I said, you and I should team up, and we should do a sports photography course for parents on how to take better sports pictures of their kids. And he's like, that's exactly what I was thinking. We teamed up, recorded a course, And we made more in the first day from that than I made in a year as a sports photographer
No. Wow.
from that collaboration.
Yeah.
Well, if I would have just stayed at home and saved my money, or if I would have just listened to the speakers, none of that would happen. It happened because of that one connection. And it is, and the more I talk about this, the more people go, I've got that one connection. I had that one time this person did this. I'm like, that's what it's about. And
So good.
that's what the event is about.
This has been phenomenal. Thank you so much for sharing this. And I know I have told you this, and I've told so many people. And you mentioned it a little bit earlier. Your book, The Wealth of Connection, one, and I've got a copy right behind me. Wealth of Connection. If you've never read this, you've got to get it.
Thank
Uh,
you.
this is literally one of the best business books I have ever read. I've read a lot of books. This one I go back to, and I read this one. I've read this one 3 times already, and I've listened to the audiobook so multiple times. It is just so good. And this is what a lot of shows, a lot of trade shows, a lot of conferences are missing because, like you said, they're coming from that platform. It's more of a, we're pushing information to you,
Mm-hmm.
and then you've got to, you're so busy taking in this information, trying to assemble in your mind, how am I going to use this information, when the person next to you may bring you way more value than all of that information that you just took in. And because then you go back to your day job and you're like, oh shoot, I've got all this other stuff to do now on top of all this new information. You may never get there. It's about the connections.
Yep.
And plain and simple, it's about the connections. Uh, if people want to learn more about the unconference, what's best way for them to do that?
Yeah, there's a link. I'll send you the link, but there's a link on the website, totallifefreedom.com. So there's a link for it right there. It's an application event because it's the type of an event where we're not looking to scale this thing. So we're not looking to get as many attendees as possible. We want ones that fit. But if this resonates and you're a business owner, this is, please apply and I'll have a one-on-one conversation because it's about connection just to make
Yeah.
sure it's the right fit both ways. It's a pleasure to do so. So yeah, they could apply there if they're interested in coming. It's February 3rd through the 5th, 2025 in Sarasota, Florida. So if you're in Ohio like Jim and you want to get away from the snow and the cold, it's a beautiful place to go.
Absolutely. And I will be there. So I'm really
Yes.
excited about that as well. And if they want to get a copy of your book, Wealth Connections, what's the best way for them to do that?
Amazon's the easiest, but I give away the audiobook for free. So I'll
Ah,
send you the link, Jim, if you want, put it in there. They can download
absolutely.
the audiobook and listen to it for free because as Seth Godin said to me, he goes, the best way to get a book out there is get it in 10,000 people's hands. And so we just do that as a way to just spread the message because it's not about selling a book, it's about spreading the message. So I'm happy to send you the link.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And everybody take advantage of that. Check out the link. And if what we talked about today is resonating with you, check out the Unconference. I will drop the link of that into the show notes and the description here. And if you're putting on an event and you're thinking, how can we do things a little bit differently? What is some of the information that you heard today that resonates that you could say, okay, maybe we're not going to flip our whole event upside down, but how do we make a portion of it
Yep.
really about connection, really about connecting the attendees and the vendors, the attendees and the sponsors, the vendors with each other? What are other ways you can make connections happen? Because when that happens, growth happens,
Magic
and
happens.
it's going to be magic. It's going to be
Yep.
magic. So, Vincent, thank you so much again for coming on and sharing all this great info.
My pleasure. Thanks, Jim. I always appreciate, always love talking to you. And thank you so much for having me on.
All right, everyone, keep coming back, keep binging, and keep learning. And we'll see you next time here at Trade Show U.